Hey guys, Justin Wayne's back here with College Fishing 101. In today's video, I'm going to go over the 4 fishing knots that I think every angler that's starting out needs to know. There's a lot more, and this can get really complex. There's certain guys that throw certain knots that some people have never even heard of, but these right here are the main 4 I think every beginning angler should understand how to use, when to use, and how to tie them. So the first one is the improved clinch knot. I use this knot whenever I'm not tying directly to the hook. So for instance, I've got a topwater spook right here. The hook eye is above the treble hooks. Another great example is a rattle trap, where what you tie off to is not directly in line with the hook. It's not the hook in general. So for this one, it's actually really simple. It's really quick to tie. I know a lot of people that just use this knot primarily. So what you do is you take your line, I'm using this white cord as my fishing line, feed it through the eye, take it. I like to leave about, when I'm tying it, probably about 5 inches. This is a little exaggerated, but it's just because it's thicker cord. You then twist the lure 3 or 4 times. 5 or 6 if you're using a fishing rod, and then you take your tag end, feed it back through. There's a hole that'll form when you twist right here above the hook, or above the hook eye, whatever you want to call it, right above it. You feed that through, then you take your tag end and pull it back through this now made loop. This is the time when you wet your line, spit on it, duck in the water, whatever you want to do, and then pull your tag end and your main line at the same time. And what happens is this section right here is cinched down, and your tag end is left just like that. This is a really strong knot. You can then snip your tag end off. But this knot, like I said, I use 90% of the time, if not 100% of the time, when I'm not directly tying off to the hook. So any type of lure that's not directly hooked up with the actual hook itself is when I use this knot. So the second knot I'm going to teach you how to tie is called a Palomar knot. Now, a Palomar knot I use whenever I'm tying my line directly to the hook. So for instance, on a jig, the hook eye on a jig is connected directly to the hook. There's no play in it. So whenever this hook eye is actually the hook eye of the actual hook. Not in a case like this, where you tie onto the lure is not directly connected to the hook. So starting off, what you do is you take your line and feed it through the hook eye, like such. You then take the end of your line and feed it back through the same way you just went in. So that way you have a hoop on one end and 2 lines on the other. You then take that hoop, come over, and tie an overhand clinch knot. Something very similar to that. So you have your clinch knot, you have your hoop, and then you have your 2 lines. You then take your hook or your jig or whatever you're tying on and feed it through that hoop. This is where you wet your line. Then you pull your tag end first, then you pull your main line. And if this was a fishing line, this would all cinch down. And that's how you tie a Palomar knot. Third knot I'm going to teach you how to tie is called a snell knot. Now, this knot kind of has a little bit of controversy around it, because if not tied correctly, it can actually make you lose fish compared to catch fish. The importance of a snell knot is all in the beginning. I'm going to use this curl right here as the hook bend. So for instance, on this jig, as you can kind of see, that's the way the hook bends. I'm going to use this. It's the same thing. So the key to a snell knot is all how you start. So first thing you do is you feed your line through the top of your hook. That way the point's pointing up, your hooks go straight down. You then take your line and make a hoop very similar to that. So this is your main fishing line. This is the line that's through the hook. You make this hoop. You then take this line and twist it over 3 or 4 times. I'm only going to do 3 here. With this knot, normally you don't have to do very many. You then take your line and feed it through this hoop again that you've made at the end. You then wet it, pull it tight, and pull it tight through your main fishing line. Now, the perks of this line is when you're flipping heavy cover. I only use this when I am pitching or flipping a heavy weighted thick wire hook. So if I'm trying to punch through grass, or if I'm trying to pitch into some really heavy cover and I need this hook to go straight in, I don't have very much ability to pull. The great thing about this knot is if it's sitting down, like for instance here, and this is, I'm going to use my finger as the weight. If I'm sitting down and a fish picks this up and he holds it like this, when I set the hook on that weight, it's going to put that hook point directly into the roof of the fish's mouth. Now, if you were to tie this opposite, which is why I think this knot has a lot of controversy behind it, is if you tie this opposite, with the hook point down, and you tie this knot, do a real quick one here. Just put 2 lashes over just to show. And you tie this knot like this, it still looks the same on the presentation, but when you go to set the hook, that hook points straight down, and you're going to miss a fish every single time when you set the hook. It's going to put, it's not even going to catch the bottom of the fish's mouth. It's going to set the hook, it's going to miss everything, you're going to blow the lure out of the fish's mouth, and then you've lost your fish. So the key to the snell knot is all in the beginning. You have to make sure your hook point is facing up. You feed it through. Make your loop. Tie it around the shaft of the hook 2 or 3 times. Feed it the tag end through the hoop. Pull your main line tight. And that knot will not break. And the perks to it again are when you set the hook using a heavy weighted jig. It needs to be a heavy weight because you need something that's going to slam down onto that hook. When you slam down onto it, it points that hook point straight up. Grab it. The 4th knot that I'm going to show you how to tie today is actually not a knot you tie to a hook. It's how you connect 2 pieces of fishing line. Now, when you're fishing with braid and you're fishing in clear water, braid is very visible to a fish. So you don't want a fish to see the braid or the line coming off your lure. So what a lot of people do is they connect a fluorocarbon leader 8 to 10 feet in front of it. Now, this is called a double uni knot, and it's actually really simple to tie. I use it for when I'm tying a backer fill onto my reel. When I want to connect my main line to my reel, then I use this knot. I use it for leaders, I use it for anything. To start out with, I'm going to use this green piece of cordage as my braid, and my white cord here as my fluorocarbon leader. So what you do is you take your braid, your fluorocarbon, and cross them over like such. Nothing's too spectacular. When they're crossed over, I normally like to use the leader material as the tying because I don't want the braid. Braid can sometimes be abrasive and I don't want it to cut through my fluorocarbon. So I take the fluorocarbon and I start wrapping it around both the tag end of the braid and the main line braid. You then take your tag end of your fluorocarbon leader and then put it back through the hoop. See, I'm going back through the same way I came in. You then take both sides, pull it tight, and now those 2 fishing lines are now permanently combined until you cut it. This is when you take and you cut this tag in here, you cut this tag in here, and now that knot on fishing line is really small. It's not going to get stuck in your guides, and it's not going to come undone. You don't have to worry about the knot breaking, the knot tearing, because all that's happened when you tie it the way I did with the fluorocarbon as the wrap, that fluorocarbon is just grabbing onto that braid and it's just hanging on. If you tie the braid around, you have an opposite effect. When you cinch that down, that braid is digging into the fluorocarbon. I haven't had one break yet, but that's just a personal opinion. So just to show how I tied that again real quick. My line separated. This is my braid. This is my fluorocarbon leader. You cross them over like such. You then take and pinch the braid. Take the end of your fluorocarbon, wrap it around the braid 4 or 5 times. It doesn't have to be much. You then take the end of your fluorocarbon leader, put it back through the same way through that loop. You then pull both tag ends, pull both main lines, and now that knot is cinched down. And those two lines are now connected. And then you take your fluorocarbon leader and tie either a Palomar knot, an improved clinch knot, or a snail knot, depending on what you're fishing. Well guys, that's the 4 knots that I think any upcoming and new angler needs to learn how to tie. It may take you 3 or 4 minutes to learn how to tie these knots starting out with. The biggest thing is just practice. Here, for instance, if you want to learn how to tie them and practice tying them, I'm using something as simple as a paint can opener. You can use a eye bolt, anything. It's just practice. I've practiced these knots so much that I can tie any knot in less than 30 seconds, regardless of the difficulty. And it's all about practice. The more you practice, the more efficient you're going to be, the less times you're going to mess up, and the stronger your knots are going to be.